Hi, this is Erin O'Riordan. Welcome back to Storytime. We are on Cut Episode 4. If you haven't heard Episode 3 yet, click the link right here. Make sure you're a subscriber so you don't miss a single episode. And if you're liking the story, please give us a thumbs up and leave a comment below. Let us know your thoughts. Cut Episode 4. He told himself he would pretend nothing was wrong, but he couldn't fool himself. He could forgive himself for having done something wrong, even something so immoral, so reckless. Harder to live with would be what would come next, living with the knowledge of what he'd done, but not letting on. The congregation knew he was only human. Their capacity to forgive him wasn't the problem. Everyone had moments of weakness. The thought of Barbara Jean knowing what he'd done appalled him. Fragile as her body was, her spirit was even more so. He couldn't bear to have her look at him and know where he'd been on their anniversary. Barbara Jean was in bed when he got home. It was too dark for her to see him. Silently, he thanked God. "How was your walk?" Barbara Jean asked, suppressing a yawn. "Fine. It was a beautiful night for a walk. I wish you could have been there with me, Barbara Jean. We still had a nice anniversary, didn't we?" she asked sleepily. "Yes, we did," Edward replied. He thought, but didn't say, "It's too bad it will be our last." He knew it was the truth. Chapter 6, September 1999. "Fred," Brigid whispered into the phone. "What the fuck?" Fred answered, her voice ragged from the earliness of the morning. "Be my alibi," Brigid said louder. "If my mom calls and asks, I slept on your couch, all right?" "Brigid, where are you? Are you in jail?" "No," Brigid responded. She couldn't think of a lie quickly enough, so the truth came out. "I'm at the downtown Westin. I was with you all night, okay?" "Okay," Fred replied, sounding reluctant. Brigid got dressed and stuffed her belongings back in her purse. Brigid's mother, Jessamine, stood at the window when Brigid arrived home. Arms crossed, Jessamine wore an unhappy expression. Brigid parked the Jetta in the driveway. She slung her purse over her shoulder and walked to the back door. The door was unlocked. Brigid threw her purse down on a kitchen chair and looked up to see Jessamine blocking the doorway. "Where the hell were you last night?" Jessamine demanded. "I called Jerry. He told me you left an hour after closing time." "Relax," Brigid insisted. "It was no big deal. I know you don't like me drinking after work, but Jerry doesn't mind, so I had 2 beers. Then I felt a little woozy, so, being the responsible kid that I am, I crashed at Fred's." Jessamine's eyes grew wide. "Who's Fred?" she asked. Brigid looked incredulous. "Mom," she said. "Fred. Frida. Franciscati. She went to my high school? She doesn't live far away from Keaton, so I called her after work. We walked over to her place together, and I slept on her couch. You can call her and ask her, so don't get all wigged out and parenty on me. I'm sorry about the beer, Mom. I was only socializing, really." Jessamine glared. "Does this Frida have parents?" "Mom," Brigid said, "everybody has parents. Fred doesn't live with hers anymore. They have like 10 other kids, and she's been on her own since she was 17. She's very responsible." Frida Franciscati's Catholic parents did have a total of 10 children, all of them older than Frida except for her brother Domingo. She rented a house from her sister Paula and Paula's husband Jeremy. Paula and Jeremy looked the other way when Fred and her roommate paid the rent late. Brigid gave Jessamine her best good girl smile. Jessamine enfolded Brigid in a hug. "I worry about you. I know you're a good girl and you can handle yourself. I worry about you because I know what I was like at your age. Grandpa Gage and Grandma May Lee may seem like sweet old people to you, but they were strict when I was young, and I rebelled." I know," Brigid said. She heard her mom's life story every other day. "You started out with sneaking Grandpa's cigarettes and then drinking wine, and the next thing you know, you're out on the street sniffing cocaine and shooting morphine. If you hadn't gotten pregnant with Diana, you never would have stopped using drugs and you'd be in jail or dead by now. Have I pretty much got it?" "Don't be a smartass," Jessamine chastened. "I had a very rough time in my young life. Back then, we didn't even worry about things like AIDS." "I'm not going to end up like you, Mom, I promise." She gave her mother a kiss on the cheek. "I worry about you," Jessamine said. "I don't want you to make the same mistakes I did. I don't want to be a hard ass, and I don't want to push you away, but I don't like you drinking beer after work." "I know. I'm sorry." Brigid desperately craved sugar. She peered into the refrigerator, pulling out a loaf of bread and a jelly jar. She stuck 2 pieces of bread into the toaster. "Oh, shit!" Jessamine looked at her watch. "I've been so worried about you that I forgot I had a sales meeting this morning." Jessamine was one of the city's top real estate agents. Brigid always thought her mom's looks had a lot to do with her sales record. Jessamine, Chinese on her mother's side and French-Irish on her father's, had Grandma Meili's thin frame, glossy black hair, and almond-colored skin. Brigid knew Meili's hair had been glossy black from old photos. It had turned stark white by the time Brigid's older sister arrived. From Grandpa Gage, Jessamine had inherited green eyes and an adorable stripe of freckles across her nose. She was a good foot taller than everyone on the Chinese side of the family, luckily for Brigid's basketball career. In contrast to Jessamine, Brigid had brown eyes and a red-brown skin tone. Her father's brown eyes and light cinnamon skin tone, if she remembered correctly. She hadn't seen her dad in 2 years. When his band toured, he only came to town to play a show. When she thought about her dad, Brigid only got angry. Brigid didn't even like his stupid hippie jazz music. Brigid's toast popped up as Jessamine rushed out the door for work. Brigid spooned heaps of strawberry jelly onto her toast and sat down at the table. She really wanted an espresso with extra sugar to wash the toast down, but at the moment she felt too lazy to walk over to the cappuccino machine. No way in hell was she going to school today. It would be a good day to hang out at Fred's, for real. Chapter 7, October 1999. Tim watched in the mirrored wall across from him as his yoga students filed out of the room. All 16 of them were retired people. Except for Mr. Henderson, they were all ladies. To Tim, Mr. Henderson seemed more interested in standing in the back of the room checking out the ladies than in yoga. Tim went into the men's locker room and changed back into pants and a jacket. He stuffed his yoga pants and t-shirt into a gym bag and slipped on his winter coat. He took the stairs down to the ground floor, stopping at the parking garage to throw his gym bag in the car. On Wednesdays, the noon class was his last of the day. He thought he might walk to the cafe down the block and treat himself to a sandwich. When he stepped outside, he noticed much warmer weather than he expected. Unusual for October, he thought. Still, he would take his good fortune. Tim was almost in front of the cafe when he noticed the antique shop across the street called House of Something Beautiful. Many beautiful things filled the front window. A dining table with fancy high-backed chairs set with a pale pink linen tablecloth, a European-style tea set with delicate silver stalks of wheat, and as a centerpiece, a clear vase of white and purple orchids. To one side of the dining room set stood a clock shaped like a windmill, 4 feet high, with blades that really turned, and on the other side was a life-size statue of a woman or perhaps a goddess. The statue caught Tim's eye, and he studied it further. She was a goddess, the goddess of compassion, or more properly, the bodhisattva of compassion, Kuan Yin, according to some schools of Buddhism. Tim had seen her image many times in his childhood, and this image struck him as particularly beautiful. She was made of shining bronze with inlaid pearls on her necklace and headdress. She wore a modest gown that nonetheless gave the impression of shapely breasts and hips underneath. One hand was raised in a traditional gesture of blessing. The other hand rested on her knee and loosely held a basket of fish. The fish were finely rendered right down to the scales. Tim felt so struck by the statue he decided to go into the shop and have a closer look. The white-haired woman behind the counter gave Tim a nod as he came in. Her hair was tied up with a red ribbon, the same way Kuan Yin's was tied up in her jeweled headdress. Something seemed familiar about the two faces. The woman at the counter let Tim explore the statue for a moment before she approached him. "She is fascinating, isn't she?" the woman said. "Do you know much about Kuan Yin?" She had a slight accent. Tim guessed she was from China, although she must have lived in the United States for many years now. "Well, I was raised in a Buddhist household," Tim said. "I know a little about her." The woman nodded. "Then I'm sure you'll recognize the basket of fish as a fertility symbol. This piece itself is not old. It was cast in the 1970s here in the United States. It's a replica of a 12th century Chinese original currently in the British Museum. Before being plundered by the British, it probably served a Chinese village as the shrine women prayed at when they wanted to become pregnant, as well as where they gave thanks once they'd given birth. I like to think of her as a Chinese Virgin Mary. Feel free to look around and let me know if there's anything else I can help you with." The woman smiled and went back to her work at the counter. "I will," he said. Looking around, he noticed the shop had many Asian artifacts. There were many smaller statues of Kuan Yin, as well as statues of many armed Hindu deities. High on a shelf stood a plaster Kali, her skin painted gray-black, her pierced tongue protruding from her bright red lips. Japanese-style tea sets and Chinese rice bowls, along with an assortment of more typically American dishes, lined the lower shelves. Tim knelt to examine a set of cups with a cherry blossom pattern. With a rustling sound, a second woman emerged from behind a curtain of bamboo beads. Much younger than the white-haired woman, she might have been Asian or Latina. She had bright green eyes and a stripe of freckles across her nose. She wore a t-shirt with the meditating Buddha on the front, the same kind Tim's younger yoga students wore. Tim couldn't help but smile. "Grandma," the younger woman said, pulling on her red quilted jacket, "I think I'll go to the pizza place for lunch. Do you want me to bring you back something?" The older woman wrinkled her nose. "I've never been much of a pizza person. I brought a cup of soup with me anyway." "All you ever eat for lunch is chicken soup," the younger woman answered. "Don't you get sick of it?" "You know what's good," Tim spoke up, "the place next door." "I'm sure it is," the younger woman replied, "but we work in an antique shop and that place is fancy. We're not exactly rolling in dough over here. I want something good, fast, and cheap." Tim stood and walked over toward the counter where the woman stood. His right hand felt restless. He shoved it into his jacket pocket, hoping she hadn't noticed the gesture. "If you'd like," he said, "I'll take you there. My treat. My name's Tim Kawaguchi, by the way." He offered her his hand, and she shook it. "Nice to meet you," she said. "I'm Diana Bell. I'm sure you've already met my grandmother, Mei Lee." "Yes, we were discussing fertility rituals," he said. Diana gave him a funny look. "Did you say your name is Kawaguchi?" Mei Lee asked. "Grandma," Diane said. "What?" Mei Lee asked innocently. "I asked the man his name. I don't care if he's Japanese. I really don't. I'm a Christian, and I firmly believe that we are all God's children, even the Japanese." "Mei Lee!" Diana shouted. "She's being facetious, Tim. She's not really prejudiced against Japanese Americans." "It's okay," Tim said. "I used to be the only Asian guy on the police force." "Do you ladies have any idea how cops talk to each other? Believe me, if I could put up with that, nothing bothers me. Why don't I tell you more about it over lunch?" "I guess that would be okay," Diana said. "Be back in a half hour," Mei Lee added. Diana looked at the menu. Lots of foreign words on it, exotic foods that sounded low-fat, low-sodium, and healthy. Mei Lee would have loved it, but Diana still thought about pepperoni pizza. She smiled and tried not to let it show. "Soba," Diana said to the pale, balding man behind the counter. The noodles and sauce looked pretty good in the picture on the menu. "Soba does sound good," Tim said, "but I think I'll have the grilled portobello sandwich. Vegan style, please. No cheese, and an herbal tea." "Would you like something to drink?" the man asked Diana. "Diet Coke," she ordered. "We don't have Diet Coke," the man behind the counter said. "Maybe you'd like to try one of these instead. They're sugar-free and made with all natural ingredients." He gestured to a cooler on the counter. It was full of glass soda bottles. Their contents were milky and came in sick-looking pastel colors. Diana couldn't decide which sounded worse, banana watermelon harmony or carrot mango sunrise. "I'll have a bottle of water," Diana said, stepping over to hide behind a tall potted palm while they waited for their food. The man behind the counter handed Tim a steaming cup of water. Tim walked over to the display of herbal teas. Diana read the names on the sides of their multicolored boxes. The teas had names like Passion, Tranquility, and Energy. Glancing over at Diana, Tim chose Endurance. When he opened the envelope, it smelled like orange peel and cloves. Good choice. He smiled. They picked out a table. "So are you a vegetarian too?" "Not exactly," Diana answered. "Before you came along, I planned on chowing down on a couple slices of pepperoni and sausage." He nodded. "You can still eat things like that because you're young. How young are you, by the way?" "I'm 21. I've been working with my grandma in the mornings for a couple of years now. In the evenings, I go to business school. When Mei Lee retires, she's going to let me run the antiques shop. I'm hoping to have a few other shops going by then." She looked down at the soba. The noodles were brown, obviously some type of whole grain. They were covered in a brown sauce and flecked with sesame seeds and matchstick vegetables. She picked up her fork and tasted a noodle. It wasn't bad, even if the sauce was cold. I need chopsticks. I never learned how to use them myself. My dad taught me. He's Mexican, but he's one of those hip people who try to impress you with their knowledge of Vietnamese food. Really, I would have preferred eating macaroni and cheese with a spoon like a normal kid. Macaroni and cheese was one of my mom's specialties, especially with hot dogs cut up in it. He made a face. Diana laughed. Wait, you never told me how young you are. 32, he said. I was going to guess that, she said, wiping a drop of brown sauce off her chin. And you used to be a cop. How come you're not anymore? That's a long story. I'm sorry, I don't mean to pry. What do you do now? Yoga instructor. I work at the gym down the block. That's a big change, she remarked. Cop to yoga instructor. It depends on how you look at it, I suppose, he said. Yoga is more than a bunch of stretches. It's a form of meditation. It takes concentration and control of one's emotions. With discipline, one can even control the body, the heartbeat, the breathing, and the flow of impulses from the brain. Each of these is very important to police work as well. Wow, I bet there's a lot less stress in teaching yoga, though. That's a fact. He took a bite of his sandwich. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Diana had stopped to look at her watch when Tim said, I just noticed your necklace. That's interesting. You have 2 pendants on the same chain, the Christian cross and Kuan Yin. She almost looks like the statue I was looking at in your shop, except without the basket of fish. So, is it possible? Can you be a Christian and a Buddhist at the same time? I'm neither a Christian nor a Buddhist, she said. I'm a Wiccan. Wearing a pentacle gets me too many weird looks in line at the grocery store. I find it interesting. What do these symbols mean to you? I mean, if you don't mind talking about religion with somebody you just met. She took the last bite of soba. I don't mind. The cross and Kuan Yin don't have anything to do with religion, actually. They're family heirlooms, in a way. The cross was a gift from Mei Li and her husband, Gage. It used to be part of a rosary. They gave it to me when I was a baby. It was a hint that my mom was supposed to get me baptized, which she never did. She shoved the cross in the back of a kitchen junk drawer and forgot about it. It came in this shiny, white, iridescent box. It sort of looked like it was carved out of a big pearl. When I was a little girl, I was looking in the junk drawer for some scissors so I could make paper dolls for my little sister, and I found it. I didn't know what it was, but I knew that it was a pretty necklace with all those little red beads. So I put it on. I started wearing it every day. When my mom was around, I'd hide it under my shirt because I didn't want her to know I'd been in the junk drawer. I wore that rosary as a necklace for years. This was in the 80s, during the Madonna years, mind you, so lots of girls wore rosaries. Tim laughed. I remember that. Yeah, she said, but then my sister got mad at me and grabbed me by it. It broke. The beads went all over the dining room. I scooped them up, stuck them back inside the pearly box, and shoved it back in the junk drawer. I had forgotten about it, but my mom gave it to me in a box of my things when I moved out. Mei Li freaked out when she saw it. She got upset? Elated, actually. She thought I'd converted to Christianity. She was pretty much crushed when I told her I only liked it because, well, it reminds me of when I was little. Mom, Brigid, and I were a happy little family as long as my dad wasn't coming around, making things complicated. Why am I telling you all this? She looked at her watch again. Because I asked, Tim said. I find you fascinating, as a matter of fact. You're being polite. Quite the opposite. Being polite is what you do when someone is unpleasant. I'm soliciting information from you in a way designed to make you stay as long as possible. Therefore, I think you're pleasant as well as fascinating and beautiful. She tried to hide her blushing face behind her water bottle. I should be going. He sat back in his chair and folded his hands in his lap. I'm getting nowhere with you? That depends. Where were you trying to get with me? I'd like to know your phone number, then we can continue this conversation later. She reached into her tiny handbag of red silk, embroidered with a dragon. She pulled out a notebook and a pen and scribbled down her number. She folded the paper in half and set it on the table in front of him. Thanks for lunch, she said, zipping up her red quilted jacket. Call me on Friday. We'll make plans for the weekend. This has been episode 4 of Cut by Erin O'Riordan and Ted Ellington. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and give us a thumbs up. Leave us a comment to let us know how you're liking the story. When episode 5 is ready, you can click on this link. And be sure to let us know if you'd like us to read your story for Storytime with Erin O'Riordan. Thanks. Have a great day.